What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with another pod. What's going on in pop culture right now? Jumbo packed, mega packed pod this week. Ton of heavy hitters to get to. Ahsoka season 1 has wrapped. Gotta talk about it. New music from I-DLE and NCT 127 on the K-pop front, as well as some guy named Drizzy Drake dropping For All the Dogs. Also new movies, Fair Play on Netflix, big Sundance hit, and The Royal Hotel starring Julia Garner, coming out to critical acclaim. Very exciting. And oh yeah, Marvel's back with their most successful series to date, Loki Season 2, out now, Episode 1. So a lot of good stuff to get to there. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. Get the pod anywhere you can. Just make sure you get it. Leave me a YouTube comment, send me a tweet, let me know how you're feeling, and make sure you also see the links below for the best of 2023 Spotify playlist for my favorite songs of the year, updated weekly. Let's get to it. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Fair Play, the new erotic thriller film on Netflix, starring Phoebe Dynevor and Alden Ehrenreich. This was a big hit out of Sundance. Netflix picked it up, just dropped. Directorial debut from Chloe Domont, who is a TV writer, experienced TV writer. And yeah, I like this movie quite a bit. I think a big part of the appreciation for this, and a big part of the general appreciation that everyone seems to have for this movie, is that they don't really make movies like this anymore. You know, these are the movies that back in the day were huge star-making performances, star-making roles. Phoebe Dynevor, I didn't see Bridgerton, but she was the big Bridgerton breakout, so this is my first time really seeing her. And Alden Ehrenreich, who, I've liked since Hail Caesar, but hasn't had quite the career I think a lot of people expected after Solo: A Star Wars Story came out. So getting a movie like this, which is a really traditional type of movie, something we don't get anymore, it's just kind of fun. I think quite simply, very appealing premise. You have this young couple in New York working at a hedge fund, having an illicit, private, hidden relationship because it's against company policy, and they're both incredibly career driven, very ambitious, and also love to fuck the shit out of each other, as evidenced in literally like the very first scene of the movie. They expect a big promotion to go to Alden Ehrenreich's character Luke. They expect the promotion to go to Luke, and things kind of get flipped on their head when actually the promotion goes to Emily instead, and hijinks ensue. The hedge fund boss is played by Eddie Marsan. One of the other PMs at the company is played by Rich Sommer, but it's really Phoebe and Alden doing everything in basically all the scenes. And I like it because it's a thriller film where you don't exactly know where it's going to go. There's definitely some surprising twists and turns, and there's definitely a lot of tension. Like, there's a lot of, I think, pending dread coming up as Luke really seems to lose his cool, lose his inability to accept that he was passed over for the role. And this movie, I think it just plays at a lot of, rich themes that there's a lot of things to get into there. Just general male ego, finance bro culture and the misogyny of that culture, the lengths you'll go for personal ambition, what means the most to you. Quite simply being in a relationship as a man where the woman is earning more than you, more successful than you, and being okay with that. Like, I think it's one of the more interesting movies, I think, to come out in this time of, like, quote, the Me Too movie, just because, not that this is a Me Too story, but it's like a really, I think, sophisticated portrayal of modern views of all these, sentiments. And I think Phoebe, who again is my first time seeing her, I thought she was really great at doing this role, which requires her to, I think, at times have a lot of grace, but also then get really heated and get really emotional and really blow the top off at times too. And Alden, as Luke, he's doing a really good job because he's not playing someone who comes across as overtly villainous or bad, but he's really good at playing the spiraling character, and also really good at kind of, the script does a really good job of matching Alden's performance, where Luke seems to be coping with how everything's going and his acceptance of his situation by going down kind of like the self-help route. And there's definitely hints of him like developing like Andrew Tate-esque views and values. It's not ever overtly said, but I think it's really precise writing, precise performance, Alden's body language, his line readings. It's all like right under the surface in the movie. I think handles all that really well. I think Eddie Marsan as the CEO also like really strong presence as, the typical cutthroat hedge fund CEO disposes of people when he no longer needs them. Really high standard for success, etc. That goes well. But really, it's Phoebe and Alden carrying everything. I think in terms of comparisons, like I was immediately drawn to Industry on HBO and BBC. I love Industry, one of my favorite shows of with its first 2 seasons. And there's a lot of similarities between Mahala Harold's character and Phoebe Dynevor's character. I think the moments when Luke makes a bad call once Emily's been promoted, Luke is working for her as his analyst. Luke makes a bad call, and there's all this pressure on Emily, and then from there, it's the choice of do they follow Luke's next plan call to get them out of the hole, which is kind of based on like some Wall Street Reddit theorizing, not really based on any fundamentals though, just general online sentiment that's not clear cut at all. Or do they go with Emily's more researched, nuanced, practical call? And Emily ends up going with her own gut, and it works. And I think from there, it's where the movie really takes off. But that whole moment of like, will the trade be successful? All that tension, even if you're not someone like me who works in high finance, the movie handles that stuff really well. Very reminiscent of how Industry handles those types of scenes. And of course, Industry, handles what it's like to be a woman in a typically male-dominated field, such as investment banking. Fair Play is doing the same. So I really enjoyed like kind of everything about the movie. I think and like again, lots of made with the erotic thriller nature of it all. I think that kind of comes and goes, but there's, I think, the very first sex scene really stands out where it's at a wedding and there's some I don't know how graphic to be, but there's some blood, let's say, not from a wound, and it's funny how they talk about it. And again, like these are the types of movies that we used to have all the time back in the 90s. So yeah, I thought Fair Play was a really effective thriller with 2 strong leads, and does a good job of both giving you some of that more erotic thriller stuff of the past, effectively telling a high-edge, tension-filled story in investment banking world, and yeah, just kind of being a bit unpredictable. I think it really kind of lands where everything it wants to go. So I quite enjoyed Fair Play. It's kind of the first of the long run of Netflix awards movies or awards hopeful movies they'll be rolling out this fall, but they're off to a good start with Fair Play. But let me know, how'd you feel about Fair Play? What's your favorite thing about it? And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of the new psychological thriller film, The Royal Hotel, starring Julia Garner and Jessica Henwick, the second film from Australian director Kitty Green, following up her debut from 2020, The Assistant, also starring Julia Garner, a film I liked quite a bit. The Assistant, I think, really put Green on the map as a really effective, poignant portrayal of, someone in a Harvey Weinstein-esque situation, not being abused, but working for such a obvious abuser and watching the system cover up the misdeeds at every turn. Really great movie. I think people know how good Julie Garner is at this point. All the Emmy wins with Ozark, really effective actress. So she's back with Kitty Green, and this time Kitty Green made a movie set in her native Australia with The Royal Hotel, and I think it's a really compelling thriller film. Definitely something that keeps you on your toes. There's a lot of edge and tension to this, and a lot of unpredictability where dread and despair is just around every turn, but you're not sure what's going to happen. Really, I think, effective premise where you have these 2 young American travelers, Hannah, played by Julia Garner, and Liv, played by Jessica Henwick, and they do kind of like a work travel program when they're off in Australia. They run out of money when they're in Sydney, and they take the only job they can get on late notice, which is working at a bar in the Australian outback, in a very remote part of Australia. Basically no services to speak of. There's no internet. Everything that is available in the area is trucked in over time. The only way in and out is via a bus that doesn't even come every day. Far cry from Sydney in like coastal Australia. And the bar they're working at is owned by Billy, played by Hugo Weaving. And they're warned, or at least it's noted, that this job will require them putting up with some male attention, because this bar, again, located in the middle of nowhere in the outback, is in close proximity to a small mining town. So all the patrons of the Royal Hotel Bar are just a bunch of miners, male miners, who are in the area or came to the area and haven't had a reason to leave, blow-ins as they're called. And there's just not a lot of support for Hannah and Liv, and they have to basically deal with being kind of pushed to their limit while putting up with this situation. And, quickly it's clear that Hannah wants to leave early. She's put off by the male attention, whether it's leering or crass joke making, just a lot of, I think, forward attention and inappropriate behavior, I think, to most people. And Liv, while certainly agreeing with the sentiment, she's able to kind of roll with the punches and put up with it a little bit more. So there's that disconnect there. But the Hannah Liv friendship is really the core of the film and how they play off each other. And I think the movie is really effective because it introduces, a handful of male characters that Hannah and Liv encounter. Of course, Billy, the head of the owner of the bar, who himself is basically a, functioning alcoholic. And then there's a bunch of other people. You have a really kind of quiet, creepy type, Dolly, played by Daniel Henshaw. And then, kind of a younger, more precocious, someone their age who seems a lot kinder, but definitely also has some motives of his own. And that would be Maddie, played by Toby Wallace, the baby teeth breakout actor. And all these characters, and there's another a minor character who seems to be kind of nicer and less gruff than the other miners, but also again has some desires of his own. And they're just, you're not sure like who is good, who is bad, or who is the least good, who is least bad. It's like, are they being, is man X protecting or taking care of the girls just to later take advantage of them in his own right? Is that why? Is that the motivation behind it? So I think a lot of like the specter of male violence, even when it's not happening, but the thought that male violence can very easily happen to you as a woman in this situation, that is basically what this movie is about, and it really effectively communicates that. Like, as a viewer, you have a lot of agita watching certain situations unfold where you just kind of fear for what's going to happen next. And there's some moments where the male patrons get drunker. Again, like, you're not sure how far they're willing to push things, but either way, they're crossing a line. And like, again, there's just a lot of tension, a lot of dread here, man. Like, and there's some really great moments too, like when Maddie takes them out on like their day off to a swimming hole down the road, and like seems to be pretty nice, but also clearly has, interest in dating Hannah, perhaps being a nice guy, who's to say, but his demeanor certainly changes once Hannah rebukes his offer. And then Dolly, Liv presents it. Maybe the guy's just lonely, give him a chance, but Hannah's clearly put off by the way he pushes the limit and, asks Hannah to smile when she passes him a beer and things like that. I like the ending. I like how everything kind of blows up, basically. It's a really fun setting, this really ramshackle bar where the girls are living upstairs. That's like our only setting, and there's really nowhere else for them to go and do. So, yeah, I think it's a really effective thriller. Garner, she's able to really modulate between intense fear and intense resolve. Like, she's a a really strong actor with this, and this is a role that kind of right up her alley. And Henwick, who I've been a fan of Jessica Henwick the past few years. She's done a lot of fun supporting roles with Matrix Resurrections, Glass Onion, of course, Game of Thrones back in the day. But I think she also does a really nice job of being a little bit of different speed than Garner, but playing off well. That friendship is communicated nicely, and you really feel for Liv when she gets a little too drunk in some situations, and you start fearing for her safety. So it's one of those movies where you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop the entire time, and as a result, there's a lot of anxiety as a viewer. But it's a really effective psychological thriller, and it really makes you think about what that situation would be like if you were there. And yeah, kind of like Fair Play. I think it's an effective portrayal of the male specter over how women exist in the world. This is obviously a very different situation. Fair Play is in the high stakes world of investment banking. Fair Play is literally in the middle of nowhere in the Australian outback. We're talking about very different clienteles here, but there is a bit of a simpatico between the general themes. So, Royal Hotel, effective thriller. This just premiered after coming out in a Telluride. So shout out Katie Green. She's definitely 2 for 2. I think it's a big step forward for Henwick, in a co-lead role here, and another notch in the belt for Julia Garner, who's really crushing it as one of our great young actors right now. But let me know, how are you feeling about the Royal Hotel? And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Loki Season 2 on Disney+, the first Marvel Cinematic Universe series to get a second season on Disney+. And Loki, of course, coming out 2 years ago in 2021, but I think to many, the best of the MCU series. I think at worst, the second best if you prefer WandaVision. But Loki, I think, really surprised all of us with a compelling and effective story about the multiverse and multiple timelines. And that is increasingly becoming rare in our very packed superhero storytelling world, where the multiverse is ever present and not always told in an effective way, of course. So Loki coming back, definitely tantalizing. I think just like season 1, the specter of the Time Variance Authority, the TVA, as our core setting and our core framing device, it's really effective with this form of storytelling. Hiddleston really at home in this performance as Loki, and I think does a really effective job in this spot. I think season 1 also some really nice casting of Owen Wilson as Mobius as well, and the Sylvie character as a pseudo villain, sometimes villain, also really strong. And I think the production design of this series really stands out compared to the majority of MCU series we've got. We're just coming off the creative nadir of the MCU on TV with Secret Invasion, one of the biggest disappointments in the history of the MCU. And, Loki season 2, I think there's a lot riding on this one. Also, we can't help but acknowledge that Jonathan Majors as Kang, the many variants of Kang the Conqueror, is still in the series and will be playing an ever-present role. We'll be seeing him a lot. And, we see the visage of him in this first episode of season 2. And, that is Marvel's definitely in a challenging spot where, of course, Loki season 2 was filmed before any of the domestic violence allegations brought against Majors had come forward. Of course, that Majors trial has yet to begin. I believe it's happening soon this fall. So there's a chance, I'd say probably a likely chance, this is the last time we see Jonathan Majors as Kang. Obviously, this situation is been really difficult, where I think obviously the issue of domestic violence and Jonathan Majors, in fact, seemingly, due to some other reporting, being a persistent abuser, that is more important than the fact that he's also a great actor. His performance as Kang, I think, is really lively from what we've got so far, and I think it stands in contrast to a lot of the other tone that you get with the MCU. It was a great fit, but if it turns out that, in fact, Majors is no good anymore, I think they'll recast him. And the Kang character, due to its variant nature, easy to pull off a recast. So we'll be seeing more of that, because obviously Marvel's not going to dump their villain. Their blockbuster movie and TV making is very important to them, whether it should be or not. That's the way it is. So probably the last time we see Kang. So we'll see how that goes. After one episode, I gotta say, Loki season 2 really kind of throwing you right into in media res. It's basically taking place right after the finale of season 1 ends, and of course that's where we were introduced to Majors playing one of the versions of Kang that Sylvie kills, He Who Remains. We'll be seeing other versions of Kang to follow, but we're given a lot of exposition. There's a lot to remember about where everything is, and we're kind of racing from the start as Loki is time skipping between the present and the past. When he goes back to the past, no one knows who he is because he hasn't been there yet. It's a pretty effective, timeline type, story action here. Again, similar to Loki season 1, where the timeline stuff was all pretty effective. So I expect season 2 to ultimately do what season 1 did a lot, where we're going to go to different settings and different times in the past and the future and things like that. And it should be just kind of fun. I'm not sure exactly what the core conflict will be with this season. I think that needs to be a bit more clear, and maybe that'll come up more once we eventually see Kang again in the flesh. So we'll see. But, I think season 1, really nice touch to introduce us to OB, aka Ouroboros, basically the TVA's IT/tech support figure who lives in the bottom basement of the TVA. And he, of course, is played by Ki Kwan, hot off, of course, the Oscar win for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Really nice piece of casting here. He fits right into the tone of the show, the tone of the MCU in general, and his introduction where OB is interacting with Loki and Mobius in the present, as well as Loki time skipping to the past, and how they both are playing a little differently, whether they remember meeting Mobius and Loki or not. Quite fun. I think that fits well. I'm curious how much more of Obi we see in the season to follow, because of course Ki Kwan is, I think just really nice, pleasant presence and fits this tone nicely. And again, those continuous scenes where we're watching the same scene play out in the past and the present at the same time. That's probably the best part about this Loki season 2 premiere. I'll be curious if this time skipping stuff is completely dropped, and we'll see if there's something more dynamic to follow. Notably, Loki season 2 has a new head writer, Michael Waldron, not involved with season 2, replaced by Eric Martin, who did some work on season 1. Michael Waldron has now moved on to writing Avengers Secret Wars, so he'll be in the Kang business, of course, to come. Raphael Kazel plays this TVA character, X5. I'm not sure how important he will be, but he's also new. So I think, in general, Loki season 1, really great as a self-contained story, and then kind of them using it as a backdoor into showing us Kang for the first time. All really effective. Now from here, I'm not sure where we go, because of course we've seen Kang again since Loki season 1. That was in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania earlier this year, both a commercial and critical disappointment for the MCU. So the Kang conflict is still not clearly defined the way the Thanos Infinity Gauntlet conflict was hanging over the backdrop of the early MCU really effectively. The Kang stuff is still undefined, and I think that's a broader issue affecting the MCU storytelling, where stuff that can live on its own, seemingly like Loki, that's fine. But when you have the big bad in this story, it'd be nice if the big bad's greater endgame was a bit more clear. And that still wasn't really the case with Ant-Man 3. So I think the MCU still had a lot of work cut out for it in terms of getting audience investment in the greater story beyond the individual movies, because again, that was the great success of the MCU project in the past, having standalone projects that also were serving a greater future story as well. We're not in sync like that anymore. As much as I love Shang-Chi, for example, we don't really have a clear endpoint, even if we know we're going to Secret Wars and Avengers: The Kang Dynasty before that. We know the Secret Wars story, if you know anything about the comics, but we don't. I still don't feel anywhere close to that. So we'll see If that changes, I'm not sure if putting all of that onus on a series like Loki, especially the second season of a series, makes all that much sense anyway. I want the movies to do this work, so I'm not really going to hold it against Loki. But I'll be curious to see how effective the plot mechanics feel with Loki season 2, because I know the characters are going to be fun. You know, the Hiddleston performance is great. Mobius was a really nice addition. Hopefully, Obi sticks around. We know how great Sylvie is too. I know that's all going to be there. I'll be curious if the other stuff is too. Let me know how you're feeling about Loki season 2 after the first episode. What do you most want to see with Loki season 2? And for more TV reviews, movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Ahsoka season 1. Yes, the first season of Ahsoka, the Star Wars series on Disney Plus, has concluded after 8 episodes. And yeah, I really liked Ahsoka a lot. I think there's a lot to get into, and I think it's very interesting to think about Ahsoka because I think your enjoyment of Ahsoka largely will hinge on to what degree a Star Wars fan you have been with the television shows, namely the previous Dave Filoni properties. The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, of course, people know Clone Wars, where Ahsoka Tano, the character, came from. There are beats, there are references, there are odds and ends through this Ahsoka season 1 that will not land or not land as strongly as they should if you are not a viewer, watcher of Clone Wars and Rebels. I think that's a very interesting place for Star Wars storytelling to be in. Although if you think about where we've been, with Star Wars TV in the last, 2 years or so, right? I think we've kind of been serving a handful of masters. You kind of have the down the middle for everyone Star Wars series with The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. You have kind of a nod to the prequel fans, but still kind of for everyone with Obi-Wan Kenobi. You have obviously amazing storytelling, absolutely excellent TV making for the heads type thing with Andor. And on the other side of the coin, for the animated show heads, you have Ahsoka. We're kind of serving an interesting Venn diagram with all these shows, and we'll see where Skeleton Crew fits in. That'll be our next Star Wars series sometime next year. But Ahsoka, I think, is coming in an interesting place. It's definitely a lot more satisfying to the hardcore, prequel slash animated show fan than I think Obi-Wan was, right? You can check my review on Obi-Wan, of course. I think Ahsoka overall, I really enjoyed it. I think it was really effective at how much plot it accomplished with its first season. And I think it's increasingly clear that the Star Wars storytelling apparatus on Disney Plus is building up to the previously announced at Celebration Dave Filoni movie that they said will be concluding the quote Mandoverse. So I think it seems pretty obvious that The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and I guess anything else, Book of Boba Fett perhaps, Skeleton Crew perhaps, Ahsoka and Mandalorian are going to conclude with the Filoni movie. And I assume, there's no reason to expect anything else, that is where Grand Admiral Thrawn will be defeated in that movie. So Ahsoka Season 1 was largely set out to do what? Establish Grand Admiral Thrawn in live action, bringing back Lars Mikkelsen, who voiced him on Rebels. They did a great job. The fact that the voice is identical, I think, really works, honestly, in making it feel like it's him. What else we had to do? We had to establish Ezra Bridger in live action. Took us a while to get to Ezra, of course, but that was done. And Thrawn had to, and Ezra as well, but really Thrawn had to leave the unknown regions where he was whisked away to at the end of Rebels from the Purgles. Thrawn had to get back to the main Star Wars galaxy so his, threat to the New Republic could begin in earnest. And that's what happened in this season. So I think from a timeline plot perspective, plotting out what's going to happen with the rest of Mandalorian and Ahsoka leading up to the Filoni movie, mission accomplished. Now, there were some other cool things that happened in Ahsoka that I wasn't quite expecting. I think for starters, obviously introducing Sabine Wren to live action, another big plus, right? We got Hera as well. Hera definitely kind of off to the side, but I think it makes sense for what kind of character Hera is, and for this. And of course, we got so much great Hera in Rebels, so I think it's fine. Sabine, we learn, I think, a key piece of information here, which is that Sabine was a a kind of quote failed Padawan to Ahsoka off screen. In between bits of the story, in between the end of Rebels and the beginning of Ahsoka the series. Very interesting, right? I think Ho Yang, who obviously makes an appearance in live action, David Tennant did a great job voicing him through the whole run. Ho Yang makes, I think, a really interesting note, saying that Sabine has displayed some of the worst aptitude for being a Jedi he's ever seen. Sabine has really no connection to the Force throughout the series. That changes by the end. This is actually, if you think about it, really radical form of Star Wars storytelling, and really in sync with the Last Jedi point of view about how anyone could be a Jedi. That was what Ahsoka brought to her point of view when it came to deciding to train Sabine, someone who she had known long before that actually happened in the storytelling. And I think that's kind of an underrated element to this, where Sabine, through hard work and grinding, was able to start her journey as a fledgling, Padawan learner, which is not actually incongruous with previous George Lucas comments about how the Force functions way back in the day, but it's interesting to see this applied once again to characters we actually know. The other really interesting and unexpected thing in Ahsoka, from the storytelling perspective, would be, of course, everything we got going on with Baylan Skoll and his Padawan Shin. Baylan, of course, played by the now late Ray Stevenson. We knew he was in there. Dark Jedi, knew Order 66 Survivor, etc. Cool. Ray Stevenson, great presence as an actor, as a bad guy. But what I wasn't quite expecting was that very quickly it became clear that Baylan was a bit more gray. He had a lot of interesting thoughts. It seemed definitely a thoughtful character, even if he played his cards close to his vest. And like serving Thrawn, helping release Thrawn back on the galaxy was more of a means to an end for him. And that was definitely tantalizing, right? He's much more than just kind of a bad guy, a heavy. And that was quite appealing. And of course, what happens in the finale, and before the finale, where Baylan kind of goes rogue and like leaves Thrawn behind, releases Shin from his, master-apprentice relationship, and Baylan just kind of goes off, and we see just one shot in the finale. And what is Baylan doing? He's on a mountaintop carved like the Mortis gods on Peridia. And it's like, yep, here we go. Because if you are a Clone Wars and Rebels fan, you're a lore head like that. That is what we were waiting for. That was what we were watching for. Wasn't sure how that was going to manifest. But the application of Mortis, we knew was going to be around in some way. And of course, I'm going to get to episode 5 in a bit, where we return to the world between worlds. The Filoni lore shit, you knew he was going to put that in there. And to me, that is the most intriguing part of the storytelling. That there is what's going on with that, we don't know. But that's what's so fascinating. Of course, episode 5, Ahsoka somehow getting back into the world between worlds and encountering Anakin, Hayden Christensen reprising the role once again, and kind of going through a series of flashback trials where young Ahsoka is played by Ariana Greenblatt. We see Captain Rex briefly in live action. All of that, and the way that was filmed with Anakin and Vader being visually clipped in and out, very interesting. I think all that stuff. I'm very curious, the final fate of Ahsoka, because that Dave Filoni loves this shit so much, right? I think it was pretty easy to predict that Ahsoka would probably be the one to be left behind on Peridia. Obviously, Thrawn had to escape. We knew that would happen. I wasn't quite sure where the other, cards would lay. Sabine getting stranded as well. Didn't necessarily see that one coming. But I guess it makes sense given her progression in this episode, in the finale, with the Force. Ezra getting back to the main galaxy alone. Interesting. But now it's quite clear that the world between worlds, the Mortis stuff, Baylan and Ahsoka, that piece is how they would return. Now, of course, what's so unfortunately very sad and, of course, frustrating from a storytelling angle is Ray Stevenson kind of tragically, unexpectedly passed away in the summer, so he cannot reprise the role of Baylan Skoll. And I'm very curious if they would consider recasting the character, or, I feel like you have to acknowledge it in some way, because I'm sure that him and Ahsoka were going to converge once again if one of them was to eventually escape. Who knows? Obviously, Baylan wasn't necessarily trying to escape. He was trying to seek something along the lines with Mortis and, this other plane with the Force. It's really unclear, but it's tantalizing. So a lot of fun theorizing to come with that. In general, finding out that the planet that Thrawn got brought to at the end of Rebels, this new planet Peridia, which in turn was the ancient homeworld of the Dathomiri Night Sisters, and Morgan Elsbeth, we learned early in the season, is actually in fact a Night Sister herself. That was some fun, interesting lore notes, I'd have to say. Elsbeth and Ahsoka's duel in the finale. Shout out the Blade of Talzin, nice Easter egg there. That was a fun duel. I think that was really well done. That wide shot when they're fighting each other looked really awesome. I think, like I said, I think from a plot perspective, it really accomplished all its notes. And then the unexpected stuff of Baylan being a much more interesting character than you would have expected, Sabine having a Padawan relationship with Ahsoka, those things really stood out to me. I love the performance of adult Ezra. I thought that was kind of note perfect. Shin, also an intriguing character. She was, a few words throughout the season, but interesting, of course, still on the board there. Episode 5, have to say once again, really special, but again, kind of speaks to, like, if you didn't watch Ezra pull Ahsoka into the world between worlds and save Ahsoka from death at Darth Vader's hand in Rebels, of course, that doesn't mean as much to you when you see it. And I think that's just kind of the unfortunate reality when, these shows are not all made for the same audience. I think that's okay. We can live in a world where Ahsoka is awesome and Andor is awesome, and they're different and awesome for very different reasons. I have a feeling Skeleton Crew and the Acolyte will have a similar vibe as well in terms of feeling a little different, a little interesting, But overall, I think it's effective first season. I'm very curious, like, what the cadence now is from here. Ahsoka season 2 versus the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew coming up next. How close is Mandalorian season 4? It's all quite unclear. How close is that Filoni movie? In a sense, I think it would make sense for the Filoni movie to be the first new Star Wars movie to come out. It seems like the post Rise of Skywalker Rey continuation movie is the closer one. Of course, all that is subject to change, as we know with Star Wars storytelling in the movies. It's not really worth thinking too much about until things get more concrete and stuff starts getting filmed. So we'll leave it there. It was really fun seeing the Purgles in live action. Of course, they were referenced in Mandalorian, shown briefly. Literally watching Ho-Yang and Ahsoka use a Purgle to hyperspace jump, pretty cool. I am pretty satisfied with Ahsoka. I have to say, I'm someone who found things to like about Obi-Wan, even if the storytelling itself was pretty underwhelming. But I think Ahsoka is effective, but I think a lot of this is kind of like pause. Like, this is a really effective, like, season ending point, but also there's so much to this story that is yet to be accomplished, whereas Obi-Wan was much more open and closed type approach. So, in a sense, bit of an incomplete, it's hard to really fully evaluate Ahsoka season 1 until we see the conclusion of the Ahsoka storytelling, assumingly in the Filoni movie. So, long time to wait on that front. But yeah, shout out Dave Filoni, man. He is the most consistent force in Star Wars storytelling. Again, Tony Gilroy, not a dedicated person in Star Wars, but it's interesting, right? Tony Gilroy is someone who doesn't even have reverence for Star Wars, so he just approaches it with an amazing, uh, you know, eye for writing and whatnot. And Filoni is so in that lore bag and so hardcore. It's really cool that we have two different things like that. So yeah, shout out Hayden Christensen. It's always fun to see him coming back. I thought he did a really nice job. Especially in episode 5, he did very different versions of Anakin. Wearing the Clone Wars era armor in parts of it. So that's always fun to me. Yeah, I mean, God, there's so much tantalizing stuff with Ahsoka and Baylan and Peridea and the World Between Worlds. We saw the owl reference in the finale here. Yeah, so pretty awesome. Shout out Ahsoka, shout out Filoni, shout out Rosario Dawson. I thought she did a really nice job as Ahsoka. We, of course, had seen her doing it already. Natasha Liu Bordizzo as Sabine, I thought, did a nice job as well. Lars Mikkelsen, great presence as Thrawn. I loved his henchman, Enoch, with the cool helmet visor, kind of all of Thrawn's crew on the Chimera with like their effed up armor with the Kitsurgi, Japanese technique to meld armor and whatnot. All that was like really cool from a visual perspective. The way they chanted Thrawn's name. I think Thrawn as a character, who of course is famous for decades, now non-canon and canon alike. Thrawn, I think, is a really cool movie villain because we're gonna get so much build up to him from just Ahsoka if you're new to this, but of course all the animated for Rebels as well if you're more hardcore, and if you're even older, of course, the old books. So it's actually like a Star Wars like story that I feel like there's like real momentum on the movie front, especially because we know Mandalorian will be involved, so there'll be so much audience investment with Din and Grogu in there as well, you have to assume. So it's exciting. I think this is a really good first step in really pushing that forward in terms of like a cohesive storytelling approach to this era, the Mandoverse era of Star Wars storytelling, and it'll be fun to continue on the ride. But let me know, how did you feel about Ahsoka Season 1? Are you geeking on the Baylan ender, the Baylan mountaintop shot like me? And for more Star Wars reviews, more movie reviews, TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of I-DLE's new EP, Heat. Notably, this is I-DLE's first English EP after just giving us their 6th Korean EP, I Feel, back in May of this year. And it's not uncommon to get multiple EP drops in one year from K-pop groups, we know this, but Heat stood out to me once I realized it was coming out because this is I-DLE's first release that is not only on Cube Entertainment, their label, but also distributed by 88 Rising. Of course, 88 Rising continues to make a name as a label and distributor for Asian music, particularly in the United States. I've covered a lot of 88 Rising artists over the years, like Rich Brian and Nicki. Big fan of what they're doing. So the fact that 88 wanted to get involved with I-DLE definitely stood out to me. And I think it's a pretty interesting pairing. Cube Entertainment, not one of the big 4 K-pop labels, but I-DLE themselves, one of the biggest and most successful K-pop groups right now that is not on one of the big labels and getting all that natural big exposure and whatnot. So I think it's an interesting and tactical pairing between the two labels here for I-DLE, giving us Heat. And it's a really brief EP, 5 songs, 15 minutes, true EP length. And again, this is all in English. I think this creative decision to make a bunch of English music this year is kind of transparently coming in the wake of the success of Queen Card, the single off I Feel earlier this year. Queen Card, a song that has a lot of English in it, particularly in the hook, has become a big hit. It's a catchy song, was a big TikTok hit. It's a banger single in general. I'm a big fan of it. I reviewed that EP when it came out in May, and Queen Card was definitely my favorite song. So it kind of makes sense that they're going back to the well in terms of trying to find new fans, definitely targeting the West, obviously, with English music. And I think Heat is just okay. I didn't hear anything that rises to the level of Queen Card's catchiness, nor didn't I hear any kind of genre experiments the way I got on I Feel. There was some almost like emo pop, almost dabbling on that. It's kind of safe music on Heat overall, just kind of going through it. Track 1, I Do, just kind of a solid singing song, nothing too special about it. I Want That probably stands out the most for its production. It's like drum and bass production, pretty fun flows on there. Eyes Roll as well. I like this one. The drums are really fun on it. It's a nice, quick tempo throughout, and just really fun vocal harmonies from the members on that one. Flip It, track 4. This one apparently has become a bit polarizing. It's funny to me because this is just kind of a fun, K-pop, hip-hop song. The ladies just kind of flexing, kind of giving you that queen card sentiment. Queen card's all about being a boss bitch, and that's kind of what they're doing again on Flip It here. Notably, Shua is rapping, not something she usually does. So I think it's always cool to hear members doing something outside their comfort zone. Definitely stands out anyway. And then the last song, Tall Trees, the drum hits, I think, stand out a lot. They were kind of really push and propel the song. But overall, I think generally compositionally, production-wise, nothing too wowing about Heat. And it's, again, a brief EP, so it's hard for the members to make too much of a big impression. I think in general, I like the mix of vocalists that I-DLE gives you just because they all have kind of different vocal registers and they kind of play off each other well, especially when they dabble with some kind of like hip-hop flows in the way they sing, the way they pop in after each other vocally. So they're definitely an interesting group, but this is not some of their most interesting stuff. I'd be curious if they continue to target the West, continue to make more English music, if the partnership with 88 Rising continues, or this is more of a one-off thing. Definitely interesting. I-DLE is not a new group by any chance, by any stretch. They've been around 5+ years at this point, but they're arguably as big as they've ever been at this point as well. So kind of at interesting crossroads in a good way. So I'll be curious to see what they get up to next. I'd love another full-length album like the one we got last year. That'd be awesome. But let me know, how'd you feel about I-DLE's Heat, their first English EP? What was your favorite song from it? And for more K-pop reviews, more music reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of NCT 127's 5th album, Fact Check. Stop me if you've heard this before, but NCT are back. They seemingly never stop making music because NCT are legion. There are 20 of these dudes, many subunits, always releasing music in one form or the other. Just this year, of course, we got an NCT Dream Drop, an NCT Proper album, a NCT solo album from Taeyong, the first NCT member to release a solo album. And then, of course, a brand new subunit, NCT Do Jaejung, dropped an EP. So NCT 127 is far from the last NCT drop in some time. It's quite the opposite, in fact. NCT 127 last gave us their 4th album a little over a year ago, last year, and Fact Check is kind of similar to Two Baddies. And I think this is the general sentiment that we have with NCT's music. They have a brand, they have a sound, and they are largely sticking to that, both for good and for bad. I think NCT 127, in particular, their identity within the NCT universe, as it were, NCT 127, they make noisy music. They make, I think, layered songs with a lot of going on, a lot of drop-ins, a lot of vocal switch-ups and changes, a lot of production flair. That's kind of what they go for. And sometimes it really shines. Sometimes it can be a bit grating. I think, unfortunately, the maximalist stuff that NCT 127 goes for, I think Stray Kids just kind of does that a little bit better than them. Not to just directly compare, because they do have different things they do, but that's just kind of what stands out to me a little bit. Fact Check, though, I have to say, I like this one more than Two Baddies, straight up. For one, the title track Fact Check, I like more than the title track Two Baddies. I think Two Baddies had a really grating hook. The Two Baddies, One Porsche stuff just got old quick. Fact Check as a title track, as a single, perhaps it's less remarkable in terms of grabbing you, but I actually think it's just easier to be with as a song. The check the facts, go check that part, still kind of underwritten. Their big choruses are usually kind of flat to me. But overall, I think it's solid as the bangers go. I think what stands out most, though, about Fact Check and why I have this over two patties is that Fact Check has Angel Eyes on it. This is one of the best K-pop, deep cuts in a while, especially on the NCT side of things, because Angel Eyes is just a straight up 1980s stadium rock song. The 80s pop trend taking over our current pop music in the world. Old news. People know this at this point. It's old hat. But hearing it in K-pop, I hadn't really thought of that yet. And I think Angel Eyes, just kind of awesome. Love the guitar on it. I think vocally it sounds great, really catchy. It's definitely a huge highlight. Elsewhere on this, the song Space, I like the drums on that. I like the vocals. I think that was really smooth. I think I heard some saxophone in the background. Just immediately a more interesting song right after you hit Fact Check. Again, these lead singles, these title tracks are usually not the best song. It's really funny. Parade, a lot of rapping on that, a lot of trading bars. The sung bridge then really comes in and switches you up in a fun way. I think NCT as rappers, they're definitely up and down for me. It's kind of always been that way. When they're good, they're good. Taeyong, Mark, there's some talented guys there rapping. I think ultimately it's kind of up to the rest of the song construction, for whether I actually kind of jive with it. Because sometimes, again, like NCT 127, doing their thing, a lot of noise, a lot of production, throwing in a lot of rapping and quick flows at that. Sometimes it's just a bit too much. It's really nothing against the guy's actual rapping ability half the time. But yeah, I think Parade pretty solid for that. Yacht, following up Angel Eyes, no small feat, but I think Yacht has also a really catchy chorus, like the drums on that. I love the horns, hearing that again just after you heard saxophone earlier in the track list. That was nice. Je ne sais quoi, rap was okay, probably not as good as it was on Parade, but I think at the halfway point, the song when a lot more singing starts happening, it sounds way better, and I think the singing is really nice. I think one of the best things about NCT, because you have so many vocalists, on one hand, that's hard for me to really get into. It's hard to connect with all the individuals in the group because there's so many of them, but they're able to maintain their rapid fire, keeping the vibe moving thing because they just keep dropping in new vocalists. And sometimes the harmonies are really fun. Sometimes the switch ups really stand out when you get the vocal register really dropping, or they drop from singing to rapping. Sometimes it can really shine, but sometimes it's also just kind of throwing paint in the wall, in my opinion. So again, bit of a mixed bag sometimes. And then, from here, the last three songs are the predictable kind of slow down, ballady outro type songs. Love is a Beauty, Misty, and Real Life. I think Love is a Beauty, nice understated drum line there. Love the piano. Misty, pretty slow, honestly, but nice harmonizing. And then Real Life, I think the beat's probably more lively than Misty. But yeah, it's another 30-minute NCT 127 album. Nothing really special about it that you haven't heard before anyway, with the exception, I think, of Angel Eyes. That was something new from NCT. Obviously, it's not actually new. It's making 80s music that's inspired from the past, but it's cool. I think it's done well, and I hadn't really heard a song like that in a little bit, so hats off to them for making that. I gotta say, though, after all the NCT albums, EPs, singles that we've got this year, and again, I wouldn't be shocked if we get something else in December, to be honest, but the NCT album, the NCT Dream drop, the NCT 127 drop, the Taeyong solo album, and the NCT Dojaejung debut EP. Honestly, NCT Dojaejung, which I regrettably did not cover, that's the best NCT drop of the year, easily, in my opinion. That EP is called Perfume, the title track Perfume, one of my favorite K-pop songs of the year. That'll make my top 10 K-pop songs, easily. Incredibly catchy, incredible vocals, incredible vocal harmonies, just amazing performance from those three guys. Of course, Doyoung, Jaeyoon, and Jungwoo, who are all also members of NCT 127, because there's only three of them in NCT Dojaejung. They all get to really shine vocally. I think a song like Perfume, goddamn, that is a banger. So if there's one takeaway about NCT in 2023, I think it's to have more of an open mind about the subunits. I was certainly making jokes to myself about them making another subunit, but NCT Dojaejung's Perfume really surprised me in a great way, and that's a song I continue to go back to. So NCT 127 continuing to do what they're doing. Angel Eyes, nice 80s pop highlight. NCT Dojaejung a few months ago, Perfume, that's a smash. Of course, let me know how you're feeling about NCT in general. NCT 127's Fact Check, as well as NCT Dojaejang, NCT anything, K-pop anything. Let me know how you're feeling. Leave a comment. What was your favorite song, etc. And for more K-pop reviews, more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Drake's 8th album, For All the Dogs. Yes, of course, Drake is back with new music because this is what he does. He never goes away. Last year, he gave us his 7th album, Honestly Nevermind, and also a collab album with 21 Savage, Her Loss. Drake has since gone on the It's All a Blur tour, been in the news for a bunch of other things in addition to that tour, really taking Central C under his wing, which has been nice to see. Been at the heart of the artificial intelligence music debate with the AI song Heart on My Sleeve, featuring AI Drake vocals. And now Drake has also given us new music, despite the fact that he's been on tour for months on end. And this is kind of what Drake does. I think coming into this, I was actually very high on Her Loss. I thought Her Loss was some of the best Drake has sounded in many years. I think that's really just kind of on the banger front, right? I thought there was tons of really fun songs to spend time with on the album. And, songs like Major Distribution and Rich Flex and On BS and Treacherous Twins, Back Side Boys, Jumbotron, Shit Poppin'. I loved many songs on Her Loss. For All the Dogs is kind of in the same mold as Her Loss, obviously without the 21 Savage collab, and kind of continuing this creative partnership that Drake has developed with Lil Yachty of all people, where Yachty is once again involved on the production, on the writing side, behind the scenes on several songs on For All the Dogs, the way he was involved with songs on Her Loss. And a lot's been made of, I think, lyrically where Drake has gone to with these last two albums, Her Loss and now For All the Dogs. And I think, Drake, about to turn 37, is not really adapting to that age. He's really kind of maintaining, I won't say maintaining his youth, but maintaining the way he's always thought about things. And he's really kind of putting down women throughout the run of most of these albums now. And, it's bordering on misogyny to blatant misogyny at times. It's toxic masculinity for sure. That's what I think what Drake is now. And I think for me, I'm not really looking to these albums for strong lyrics, because Drake is not giving us consistent lyricism with these records. Now, there are fun bars, for sure. There are fun moments of writing, and occasionally he will bust out the pen and give you a time track. 3 a.m. in Glenwood was a 21 song, really nice gesture. But For All the Dogs, we have, of course, 8 a.m. in Charlotte, where Drake is once again reminding you that he is about that action when it comes to writing when he wants to. But for the most part, lyrically, it's a lot of the same stuff we've been getting the last few records. It's, Drake suffering from success. Drake can't trust any women, but let me tell you, he's with a lot of them, We know this from Drake. So I'm not really looking for anything new in that regard. I'm just, and I think the other piece too is we go through this every time Drake releases an album. Is this the best Drake album? No, this album sucks. There's so much hyperbole in both sides when it comes to any new Drake album. But also, there's always the talk of, does Drake have a classic? What is Drake's classic? And you have people that say he has no classics, like me, and people that say he's 5 classics, which is absurd. There's so much talk in either direction. I think for me, the reason I can't completely celebrate any of the recent albums is that they're just blatantly too long. He's giving you too much music. These are not curated albums. For All the Dogs is 23 songs, an hour and 24 minutes long. I love a lot of songs on For All the Dogs, the same way I loved a lot of songs in Her Loss. Trim the fat. It's just really frustrating from Drake, because Drake, right now, he's number 3 on Spotify monthly listeners. He'll get at least to number 2. I'm not sure he'll pass The Weeknd. The Weeknd's kind of untouchable at number 1 right now. But new album, bunch of new songs. He'll probably get to number 2 at least. Why is Drake so concerned with streaming? Why do we have to flood the zone, feed the streets with almost 30 songs every album? Why don't you make a really tight album and just release the best songs? I don't understand why Drake is so concerned with the streaming game. He's the king of streaming. You're still the king of streaming with less music. You'll be fine. I don't quite get it. He's going to sell 450,000 records, on pace for that with For All the Dogs, because he's Drake. The album could have been terrible, and he would have done that anyway. It doesn't matter. So it's always just a bit of frustration for me with late period Drake that he's more concerned with gaming the streams and just flooding the zone with tons of volume than it is to, actually make something more cohesive and really great. Like, look at the top Spotify chart right now, the US Spotify top 50. The first 10 songs are Drake songs, and then 8 of the next 10 are Drake songs. The whole album's at the top of the chart. That would have been the case if he released less songs. So it's a sticking point for me when it comes to evaluating the whole album. So that's why I have appreciation for the songs that we do get, and I just take away the songs that I like. So exactly what I do at Her Loss. Exactly what I do at Honestly Nevermind as well. Shout out Sticky, for example. Shout out Texas Go Green. And now, I'll just do the same thing. So, what songs did I like on this? Let's see. Again, a lot of songs to go through, but again, I think there's some bangers for sure. Right off the bat, you have Virginia Beach, which I don't love as a track, but notably it's kind of sampling Frank Ocean, and it's just a kind of a funny deep pull where it's the song it's the song Wise Man, which was going to be on the Django Unchained soundtrack. Didn't actually make the soundtrack, but Frank put it out anyway from 2012. I remember the song when it came out. It's just a funny pull because it's not a popular Frank song. Track 2, though, Amen. I think this one stands out in a nice way, just because you have Tizo Touchdown, and Tizo not doing his kind of like alt rock vibe. It's actually a little different. It's almost Tizo in his kind of soulful R&B bag, a bit different from him, and I like that. I love when the choir backs up Tizo's vocals. He sounds pretty good on the song, and just goes to show you how rapidly rising Tizo Touchdown is as an artist. In the last few years, he's been on a Drake album. This year, he was on the Travis Scott album. He was on the last Tyler, the Creator album. He was on the last Yachty, Don Toliver, and Rico Nasty album as well. Rapidly rising. A big example, classic example of Drake having his finger on the pulse with young talent and bringing them in, whether it's for self-interest or the fact that he's also a huge rap nerd. That's what Drake does. So you have Tizo Touchdown on this album. You, of course, have Sexy Red on this album, on Rich Baby Daddy. Sexy Red, one of the hottest young rappers right now, perhaps the hottest. So a big pull as well. This is what Drake does. Anyway, I liked Amen. Calling for You, nice 21 song. I think the Drake using the auto-tune, jumping out of it, the sample of the woman on the plane, I thought that was going to be the Seeing Ghosts viral plane meme, but it wasn't that. It was just some woman bitching about not being in first class. It's we get it, Drake. You're rich. We don't need to hear this shit all the time. 21 comes in. It sounds like a different song. The bass drops, but we just got so many great Drake and 21 songs. I'm not really gonna go back to this one over the Her Loss highlights. Daylight. This one is interesting. You have the Scarface sample, but of course the big talking point is you have Adonis Graham at the end, Drake's son. And yeah, don't think it sounds great. I guess it's kind of funny that Drake gave a verse to his kid. It's kind of stupid, in my opinion. Not going to revisit it all that much. But yeah, it's kind of funny. First Person Shooter featuring J. Cole. Is this the best Drake and Cole collab? It might be. Cole sounds incredible on this. Really fiery, really rapping. Awesome lines about, comparing, of course, the Holy Trio, Holy Trinity, Drake, K-Dot, and Cole. Love it. Love the Kendrick reference. Whenever we get those, I love when they talk about each other. Yeah. Take Heath beat. That's a banger for sure. And honestly, Cole kind of washes Drake. Cole's the biggest part of the song. Really awesome. I love the beat flip. Love the drums on it. I don't give a fuck. A lot of noise has been made about this one in the lead up to it because this is a song featuring Yeet. Speaking of Drake working with the hottest and the youngest stars in hip hop, Yeet, of course, is at the forefront as well. A lot of fanfare about this one. Drake on a rage beat. Drake's almost 37. can he keep up? I don't know. He barely kept up, but I gotta say, Yeet absolutely spazzed on this one. I'm not even a huge Yeet guy, to be honest, but Yeet sounds so good. This is an absolute banger for sure. Amazing beat, and Drake didn't get in the way, I guess. I really like this one a lot. I think it's really fun. 7969 Santa, you have the Chief Keef obvious pull, I don't like. Tizo touchdown again in the background. Snoop Dogg popping in as like a radio host. Shout out Vince Staples FM. I love when people do this. Yeah, that brings us to Slime You Out, the first single featuring SZA. Another example of Drake kind of just being a dick in the world, where he apparently asked Halle Berry her permission to use the picture of her getting slimed. She said no, then he used it anyway. Really disrespectful. If you're going to ask, then you should follow suit with what they say. Why would you ask? It's just kind of a fucked up thing to do. Sign Me Out. Don't love the song. Obviously, there's a lot of fanfare going into this one, as it's Drake and SZA finally making a song together after all these years. I think SZA sounds nice. Very strong singing from SZA. But the song, I don't really care for it. Drake's bars, I think, are snoozers for the most part. Didn't really like the song too much. Yeah, but it seemed to be a big hit. I think that's just because it's a Drake and SZA song and nothing else. Screw the World interlude, a bit random with the DJ Screw drop, but I mean, I guess it's cool. Let's see here. Members only. Party Next Door, fellow OVO artist. Drake always gets the best out of him. I've never really been a P&D guy for the most part. Not my favorite brand of R&B, but sounds really nice with this. I think, he definitely gives his best when Drake puts him on like this. What would Pluto do, though? Goddamn. This is a banger. This is probably my favorite song on this. It doesn't seem to be like the consensus favorite song by any means, but that is everything I want from Drake to the most part. Is a really lively up-tempo beat, Drake rapping, doing some singing, doing all the Drakeisms. The beat will kick in, Drake will re-pick up the tempo. I've been going back to this one a lot. I think it's awesome. Obviously, it's a reference to Future with the title, and lyrically, it's everything I've been saying, in terms of Drake talking about women and stuff. I don't care, though. This is, Drake sounds so lifelike. This would have fit right in on Her Loss, honestly, in terms of Drake's delivery. I think that's kind of like peak late period Drake, is that kind of delivery, that kind of performance, and I just find it incredibly catchy. Definitely my favorite song on here. 8 a.m. in Charlotte, another entry in the Time freestyles that Drake has been doing for over a decade now. Obviously, a big deal when he releases one of these songs. They're never bad. This one, produced by Conductor Williams, of course, famously one of the big influences on the Griselda sound, working with West Side Gun and Mac Homie. The fact that Drake is on the type of drum production that you get from Griselda, it's a big W for the Griselda scene and underground hip hop, alternative hip hop in general. Really cool. And shout out Conductor Williams, who's been producing in the game for a long ass time. That's a really nice song, though. I have to say, Drake, like I said, really in his bag. I did just great rapping from him. Really liked it. The Bad Bunny song, Gently, didn't care for this one, to be honest. They have a song from several years ago at this point, Mia, which I think is way more fun, way more catchy. Notably, that's a Bunny song featuring Drake, not the reverse that we have here. I think this is not the second. This is the second time we've had a high-profile rapper with a Bunny feature. Of course, we had K-pop with The Weeknd and Bad Bunny on the Travis Scott album. That was, I think, offensively terrible, and so transparently trying to cheat the system with streams. Gently is not to that degree, but I just don't think it's very good, to be honest. Drake, to his credit, is really effective at playing in other sounds, playing in other genres, and that's what makes Mia so good as a collab, where Drake is basically hopping on, Bunny as he was leaving Latin Trap behind at the time. That was, I think, a really fun song. But this isn't special at all. Rich Baby Daddy, Sexy Red, really awesome. Best part of the song. Again, kind of waxes Drake. SZA, a really nice feature on this as well, just like Slam You Out. In fact, Drake is, I think, the least important part of the song. If anything, Rich Baby Daddy could have been a Sexy Red song featuring SZA. We didn't even need Drake, to be honest. But it's on Drake's album. It's a nice song. Another Late Night. Really fun video from Cole Bennett with this one, featuring Yachty. Of course, like I said, Yachty, 5 credits on this album. It's quite fun. I wasn't expecting Drake to immediately diss Dylan Brooks. kind of feels like a dated reference at this point, to be honest. Dylan Brooks just had a really good summer competing with Team Canada, after all. But kind of a line that's been talked about a lot. I ain't pretty Flacco. Bitch, this shit get really rocky. Is it an ASAP Rocky diss or not? I think it's a really funny line, for sure. Some people, maybe it's a little elementary, but it's a funny line. Is he shitting on Rocky's dick and the fact that Drake's got a bigger dick or gets harder? I'm not quite sure. Funny line. There's some clear references to Pusha T and Kanye earlier on this that I think are clear disses or clear references, and Drake talking about fake love and beefing with older dudes and things like that. I enjoy those references. I like it when Drake is more transparent in who he's talking to. It's all fun. This Rocky line, though, I think is pretty fun. Don't think it's really much of a diss. But either way, Rocky won't respond. Rihanna won't say anything because they don't have to say anything. Away From Home. Drake has been doing this the last few albums. He just does a no-hook, rapping about his life type song. You know, sometimes they're a bit woe is me. Away From Home, though, Drake took some shots at Esperanza Spalding. Esperanza Spalding, obviously the jazz artist, famously winning Best New Artist at the Grammys, defeating both Drake and Justin Bieber back in, 2010, 2011, whenever that was. I don't think he's ever really rapped about that before. And it's kind of a teardown of Esperanza Spalding, who, is not a famous artist, but is very famous and successful and celebrated in the jazz scene. It's just uncalled for, to be honest. So I don't necessarily need to hear that. Apparently, Drake did not get credit to interpolate the chorus of West End Girls by the Pet Shop Boys. So they have called him out on that. I forgot what song he did that on. But, the Pet Shop Boys, For All the Dogs, there's a funny joke to tell there. Alas, the dogs did not go to the pet shop, whatever. I'm sure they'll resolve that, and some publishing will go to the Pet Shop Boys because Drake as publishing shares the spare. He makes so much money with all this shit after all. So yeah, I think there's some nice songs, some fun songs to be with on For All the Dogs. It's not quite to the highs of Her Loss for me. I just thought the core 7 songs I loved on Her Loss I really loved. Not quite to the same degree with me with For All the Dogs, but What Would Pluto Do? I think it's really up there for me. Some of the other songs really nice as well. But yeah, Drake, I think Drake kind of is what he is right now, and he's talking about wanting to take some time off for his health and whatnot. It'd be really nice if Drake went a year without giving us music and really put some time into the music he did make once it did come out. I think he's close because, again, I think Her Loss, he sounds really fresh, and maybe he spends more time with the writing, with some time away. We can get something really special again. But, I think for me, my favorite Drake album is If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. 8 years ago now, I'm not sure you can get back to that. But let me know, how'd you feel about Drake's For All the Dogs? How would you rank this against his most recent albums? And for more rap reviews, more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. That's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, so far, looking a little lighter. Just some music to get to so far. Troye Sivan, Tomorrow Together, I've, Offset solo album. I'm sure we'll have some more stuff as well. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. Follow the best of 2023 Spotify playlist as well. Send me a tweet, leave a YouTube comment, and I'll see you next week.